That's probably, there we go. Recording's going. That's great. A couple more people still coming. Can I just do a show of hands from the people I can see? Who is here from Portsmouth Diocese? Is your church in Portsmouth? Oh, wow, that's brilliant. Anybody here from Winchester, Chichester, Guildford? There's lots of people we might not be able to see, but that's just great. Okay, fantastic. So a couple of minutes past, I'm going to hand over with great excitement to Claire and to Jill. Jill, would you like to introduce yourself first?
Absolutely. Hello to everyone. Very pleased to be here. My name is Jill Timms. I am an associate professor at the University of Surrey, where I'm sat now, very close to the cathedral in Guildford, which is just behind that building. And here I'm based in the sociology department, but my research focuses on sustainability. I'm a fellow of our Institute for Sustainability, and I'm particularly excited and passionate about the area of flowers as an example of our sustainable practices. So I've been researching that for about 20 years now, and part of that work has brought me to the Sustainable Church Flowers movement, which I'll be telling you a bit more about.
Hello.
Hello.
Oh, hi there. Thank you. Sorry, I think I froze for a minute. So thank you, Jill. I'm going to also pass over to Claire to introduce herself.
Hello, I'm Clare Brown, and I'm a flower farmer. I'm based here in the Surrey Hills, just along the Surrey Hills from Jill. I can't actually see Guildford from my flower farm. I can see Woking, and Guildford would be a nicer view, I think. But I live in West Horsley, and the flower farm is in East Clarendon. And I'm growing on 1.25 acres of chalky Surrey down. And I sold 38,000 stems of flowers last year, and I'm aiming for 50,000 this year. So it's not a vast farm, but it is a lot of flowers. I'm a very proud ambassador of the Sustainable Church Flowers Network, and I've been running various workshops both at the farm and at churches for the last 4 years. And my farm is very much based on sustainable principles. And I'll tell you a bit more about that later on.
Amazing. So it's not our usual topic. We often have, things about heat pumps and radiators and all sorts of kind of engineering style things. But this is an incredibly important carbon issue in our churches. And it was one that I think slightly hidden, and I wasn't fully aware of until I heard Jill speak. So I'm going to hand over and let Jill tell us all about that carbon aspect. Thank you.
Oh, thanks very much. Yeah, so I should also say that I do organise the church flower rota in my own local church, which is in Hertfordshire. I'm in the Diocese of St Albans, and I come to this very much from an academic perspective, but it has also become part of the personal for me and part of the sort of crossover between life at work and at home as well, which is great when we have these opportunities to do this. I mentioned that I've been studying flowers and their sustainability for the last 20 years. It started for me as a human rights issue. I was interested in campaigns for workers' rights. And one of the cases I came up across was in East Africa. Mainly that was where research was being done at the time, and what were quite difficult conditions on farms for flower workers, and how there were numerous different groups trying to fight for better rights for workers. The more I looked into this, it was a very hidden story, and it's also one that is very complicated with regards to development issues, with regards to workers' rights, but also how they are enmeshed in issues around the environment. So I want to give you a little bit of a flavour as to why flowers are so important, but then sort of move into why this fits with what we should be thinking about in our churches, and how the General Synod motion that got passed in February came about to promote the use of sustainable flower principles throughout the Church of England. So I will try sharing my screen. This is definitely not a lecture, but sometimes pictures do help to explain some of these issues. So I hope that you can now see my slides. And whilst I am going through just a few of these, I would really like to encourage you to pop in the chat, if you like, any questions that you have. You might have flower team members who have asked you or have a query. Please put those in the chat, or anything particularly you're interested in, and Claire and I will try to pick that up as well. I'm co-lead of the Sustainable Flowers Research Project. You got our new logo up there. And this is sort of an umbrella research project for me, which I've done lots of projects within it, because since the time I did my PhD, for me, flowers has become much more of a fascination. I mentioned I'm a sociologist, and for me, flowers are one of those unusual products in that they are very fragile. They have to come from the flower to the vase very quickly under certain conditions. However, they're not essential. They are not food. We don't need them to sustain human life. But culturally, we use them throughout our lives to mark big events, as well as for things like saying thank you, for Valentine's Day, for Mother's Day, funerals, of course, and weddings as well. And theologically, actually, there is not really anywhere in the world that doesn't use flowers in some way to mark spiritual occasions. They can be very different, but it is quite a fascinating sort of topic in its own right. And then when you think about it in terms of the production and how it is used, I've become really interested, and I'm very fortunate. This has led me to meet such interesting people and to learn so much from people as well, including the Sustainable Church Flowers team. So just to give a very brief overview, it's very hard to estimate how much money is made from flowers, partly because some of it is never registered. Those growing locally don't often or always get recorded in some of the statistics. But on average, it's estimated to be about $72 billion annually. And the illustration there just gives a bit of an idea of where flowers are majority coming from, where they are going to as well. So you'll see in South America, a lot of those go to America, but also over to Europe. You'll also see those East African countries coming up into Europe. And you'll notice, possibly, if your geography is better than mine, the equator line is just about in the middle of a lot of that origin. And that is, of course, because of the conditions there, of the heating, of the availability of good growing opportunities. So it's mostly from the south to the north. And although you can't see it in too much detail, the epicenter there is the Netherlands, which many flowers still go through before they find their original destination. I do know of absolutely very, very difficult stories of flowers being flown from somewhere like Kenya to Holland to then be flown back to South Africa because of how the market system works. And just even a quick thought about the carbon footprint involved in that is very scary to think that through. It is the carbon footprint that is one of the driving factors for my research. And I must mention, this isn't just about flying flowers. This is definitely about our use of flowers out of season. So if it's out of season, they're likely to be flown from hotter places, or they might have to be grown under greenhouse production. So again, using lots of energy to do that. In addition, we have water footprint. They're very thirsty creatures, if you like, not only in the amount of water that they can take, but also in how they might run off some of the chemicals that come from water. So looking at those areas around the equator, they are often places that struggle for water, that are growing the flowers that are then moving to the north as well. There are other labour and social issues, precarious work. Think about when people mostly buy flowers, how up and down it goes. Health and safety issues around the use of chemicals, but also things like the thorns as well. Quite often issues about discrimination are based into just how big these farms are. And I've had the privilege of going to some of these farms where you can't necessarily see the worker in the next field because it's such a vast area. On a political aspect, we all know how fragile our world is in terms of geopolitics. Supply chains can be very inconsistent. So people who rely on that money of things being flown long distances can be very vulnerable there. And there's also issues of things like land grabs. I mentioned there Ethiopia, where there was riots around flower farms for government policies trying to get foreign companies to invest in those flower farms, which are predominantly owned by people in the north rather than by people in that area. And the final thing is floristry practice, which I have become more of an interest in than I ever expected. Floral foam is one thing we might talk about, but also the plastic and packaging involved in how we display our flowers. And that's one area of church flowers that I genuinely think is an easy win for churches that are trying to reduce their impact on the environment. There are great things happening as well, and I always do try to be optimistic. The Synod vote was a great point for me of recognition and of starting more change. There's also been some change in the industry. I'm invited to industry things much more than I used to be, despite my sometimes critical voice. And also starting to see some regulatory change, particularly coming out from Europe around greenwashing, but also plastic and chemical use as well. This isn't just photographs of me, this is just some of the work that I've been involved in, bringing industry partners together. I do quite a bit of media work now around this that helps to get that education across to the public, try to hook things on things like Mother's Day and Valentine's Day. And we've also had some funding from DEFRA as well as from the other government departments to continue some of the work, but not enough. Flowers always get lost, so not enough. I mentioned these because plastics, packaging and waste. We developed this guide that could be useful for church flower people as well, but it was aimed at florists to give some ideas of the problems of single-use plastics and some of the potential solutions. And the table on the left there is from our research. We developed 8 main areas of concern in the flower industry, of which you can see climate change really does have that umbrella over all of them. I think modern slavery is probably the only one I've not mentioned, and very topically that's in the news today with the modern slavery, I can't remember what they're called, commissioner in the UK government actually saying that modern slavery is now much more of an issue within the UK of UK citizens compared to how it's been seen. And some of that is agricultural work, including sometimes flower work, both internationally and in the UK. This I'm just mentioning as free resources that are available. They are from lots of different sources. This is one called Sustainable Floristry Network, who also offer a sustainable floristry course, but they also offer free resources. There's a little video there about the problem with floral foam. I always say to people that I challenge people to watch these sort of things and then still to continue using a single plastic like floral foam. And again, it's another area where parish teams can get quite easily available free advice from as well. I'm not going to play the video just now because we don't have time. But sustainable church flowers. So I have been involved in church flowers myself for quite a while, but I was put in touch with a committee who'd already begun from a very small parish, interested in what they can do with their own parish to do better at flowers. They had the influence, and they could bring on the opportunity of expertise from the floristry industry, particularly Shane Connolly, who has been involved with some of the big florist events with the royal family. That's what I was trying to get at. And has always worked, or nearly always worked, sustainably in terms of being foam free and working seasonally. So with that group, we have been developing resources for parishes, education pieces. I've just put a few selection here. There's a PCC resolution that you can download for your particular parish. It's also at diocesan level as well. And the ultimate was us taking it to Synod, where the motion got passed. We also provide things like documents you can give out to people. Your vicar can have available for people maybe having funerals or weddings at a church. We have a website that has lots of resources as well. And we have an Instagram and a Facebook group where people share their ideas, are willing, like our ambassadors, Clare, who's with us today, to share their expertise and really try to build people's confidence, knowledge, and also able to practically help what they can do in their churches. The picture on the left is my own church with our flower rota pinned up. It does go out electronically as well, with one of the Sustainable Church Flowers newsletters pinned to it, so that people get that chance to maybe find something out when they come to your church, but also to get your community as well as your congregation on board with this. So I think the final thing that I will say is just about the future for me is more about the plastic guidance and seeing how much that's making a difference in the floristry. I've been working with local flower hubs, which is growers such as Clare being able to sell their flowers together, up to 10, 12 farmers in one place, to help florists be able to access more locally grown seasonal flowers. Certification schemes, I have a prop here to show you today. Churches can go for a plaque like this. This one is a supporter. So even trying to start to make changes, churches can qualify for this. It's a free scheme. We just charge for the plaques themselves, but it allows for those conversations, for something to work together, and something as a hook on to get the community involved. Maybe you're a gardening club or allotment society, or gardeners in your area to start donating their flowers, for example. I think the other thing that I was going to say is that we are also very aware that since the church synod, some churches are struggling to know what they have to do. That includes cathedrals who are asking advice, as well as small parishes. And we do acknowledge that funerals can be a particularly difficult one. And we're working on resources and working with funeral directors around that issue. We'd really like to develop more sustainable standards for UK growers, and also to have more advice available for people doing events not just in churches, but that's my work globally as well. I'm going to stop sharing at that point, which allows me to hopefully see you all again, which is much more pleasant than just my screen. But I will just hand over to Clare in a second, just to say from a personal note, I do understand that for many parishes, this can seem, and particularly flower teams, this can seem, oh my goodness, I need to do lots of other things. I didn't know about any of this. I don't know where to start. And I do understand that it's a complicated area where, like I say, I've been working in it for 20 years and it still is continually changing. And often there's not the absolute perfect solution to something. Shane Connolly, who I mentioned, always talks about doing well, doing the best, and doing better. Just trying to avoid doing the wrong. So when you know something is actually just going to do landfill, is going to be cased in plastic, if you know something has been flown across the world, trying to look for alternatives to that, this is what we're trying to help people to inch forward to. And in terms of net zero, for me, this is just one of those things that a small change of not buying flowers that are flown, but using things in season can quite radically change an overall. How we actually measure, and I feel like I might get a question on this, how we measure the difference in carbon footprint can be very controversial in that it depends what flower you're talking about, what season you're talking about. It can depend on where it's come from, what growing conditions. Saying it's UK grown is not just making it perfect. Like Claire said, it's about the sustainable growing techniques that are important. But just as a ballpoint comparison, it's estimated that a bunch of 12 roses that have been grown in somewhere like Kenya would be about 75 kilograms of CO2, which I find it difficult to visualize, but that's about enough of the gas to fill about half a swimming pool. In comparison, about roughly the 12 blooms for a locally grown seasonal bouquet is estimated about 1.4 kilograms compared to that 75. So even if that's very rough, the idea being that it's not been flown, it's not had long transportation, it's not been grown artificially under heating, directly brings down that carbon footprint, as well as potentially having ecological benefits in terms of, like, I know churches who now grow their own and have their own eco gardens, having communities involved in that can bring back things to your churchyard as well, if you have one. We also have the problem as if you don't have a garden. We're very aware, inner city churches, things like that. Again, lots of support for those sorts of challenges as well. So since Clare is one of our ambassadors, one of the wonderful network throughout the UK that we've got, who are often growers, often florists, they volunteer to come to your church, to be able to speak to your team. Sometimes they can look in the cupboard to see what vessels you have. You know, it can be very practical or at a distance. We're able to offer that, as well as 2 recent Lent courses we've done for people directly following the Synod. There's a lot of practical help, and I can come back to that later. But for now, Claire, I'm really excited to hear what this means for you in practice and what you've come across when you've taken it into churches as well. Thanks.
Okay, right. So I've got a bit of show and tell, but I'm really glad that Jill finished up on the seasonal flowers bit, because really that's where I come in. My love of flowers is definitely from the gardening side of things. And when I started as a flower farmer, it really made me look at flowers in a completely different way, because as a flower farmer, it wasn't good enough for me to only have flowers available sometimes. I had to have them at least all through our main growing season of April to October. And actually now we manage to have something all the time through the year. So that's the first thing, is that actually using seasonal flowers means that there's always something that you can have locally. And as Jill was just finished up there with, the carbon footprint is really going to reduce greatly if you can be first call thinking about what you can get locally, whether it's a churchyard or parishioners' gardens, and or your local flower farm. And I'm just going to, I was told I must tell everybody about the things that I've done. So there is a book. This is book number two, because when I started, people would say to me, what do you have in June that's blue? And because people need to do seasonal flowers, and so we wrote a book that tells you what's blue in June. And so that's what we started off with, is making sure that we had seasonal flowers. And I think that that's the difficulty if you move from using imported flowers to using seasonal flowers, is that a lot of the time a church flower team can know exactly what they're going to get every week of the year from imported flowers, because they are the same things every week of the year. And so if you start using seasonal things, the wonderful thing, but also the difficult thing, is they will change every week. So that is something to bear in mind. I also came to flowers from a gardening point of view, and I had never done any floristry. So I'm on the really lucky side of things, is that I never ever learnt how to use floral foam. I've never used any Oasis. And that for me is really easy. I have never had to relearn. So I know that over the years I have worked with a lot of people in churches, and they have all had to relearn how to make things. So I'm going to show you some of the bases that we use for putting our flowers in that aren't floral foam, and talk you through some of the things and some of the questions that I get asked. And Jill, if there are any questions in the chat, please do jump in, and I'll talk through those. So I've got a tray of goodies here next to me, so I thought I'd just move them over and show you some of the things that we've got. So a lot of the time when people move from using floral foam, they first of all start off with the chicken wire. And I actually have moved away a lot from using chicken wire recently, because what I'm trying to do by not using a plastic is to not have something that goes in the bin. And for me, the really difficult thing is that if I send these out with my customers, I very rarely get a piece of chicken wire back. It does still go in the bin. So what I'm trying to do now a lot more is get everybody to think either reusable, so it gets brought back to me, or compostable, so that it gets put on the compost heap with the flowers. So instead of something like this, which I discovered that 9 times out of 10 didn't come back to me, we're either sending out our flowers in one of those, which, particularly if we write plant passion all over it, find that does come back to us. Actually, I had one yesterday morning with a little thank you note on it at the gate, so that was really lovely. But more and more, we're using natural things. So obviously at the farm we have various bits and pieces, but this is actually vine. And what we have done is we've tied it together with string. And this can now be a mechanic, and it can fit into either a bucket or a vase. and it can start holding stems. So having something like a vine, or this is a ring of clematis. So if anybody's got a climber of some kind in their garden, a ring of clematis does the same kind of thing. Or we've got willow. And so all of those are natural mechanics that we can use. Anything that will bend can be put into a vessel. And I think one of the other things is that we've been thinking about vases rather than vessels. Anything that can hold water can be used to display the flowers. And so anything that you can put water in, or you can put I find lots and lots of jam jars. So here we go. Here's a lovely crate that we can use on a windowsill, but actually it'd be quite difficult to just put flowers into there. But then we have little jam jars hiding in it, and we make little bouquets in the jam jars, and it makes one big arrangement. Wonderful for church windowsills, which are often awkward, narrow places to put flowers. So that's a little crate like that. Sometimes we find that actually flowers are used for events and don't need to be there for a longer time in a vessel, and also want to be taken away either to be used somewhere, decorate somewhere else. And so often we then use something like this. This is a compostable food container, and then we've put moss taken from the lawn in it, and we've tied it together with wool. So all of these are just additional mechanics that we can find in various gardens. One of the most difficult mechanics is things hanging. And that's where a lot of the people I've worked with in churches want to use floral foam, even if they've managed to get flowers in vases and in some of the places in their church. And then you can get something like that, which could hang up. And so maybe a hanging pot would be a good idea for some of the places that floral foam would be used. And again, in here, I've got a natural mechanic. This is bramble. They're trying to trip me up at the farm, so I've cut them back, bundled them in there, and now I can stick flowers in there and they will stay in my hanging basket. But this holds water very nicely. All of those are compostable. And so one of the questions I often get from church flowers groups is they have one group of people putting the flowers in, and then they have another group taking them out. And so all of those are wonderful if you just want to take them out and put them on the compost heap. But sometimes if you're having an event, you might want something that's reusable. And so there are being developed and already on the market some other mechanics which are fantastic for holding flowers in. This is a vase that I actually had made, and because I had it made this shape because it holds a pin holder. And so you stick flowers into that. And the problem with these is you often then you get a metal pin holder that we can reuse lots and lots of times, but then you use a piece of plastic tape to hold it in. And so actually what we did is we designed the pot so that it doesn't move around in the pot. So we don't need the plastic tape. So we've designed it out, the plastic. One of the things I've been asked plenty of times is how about a design for around like a wreath? And The Oasis has a plastic floral foam wreath, which a lot of churches have used. And if you want to move away from that, you might need to think of something different, but that has a hole in the middle where you can put your candle or your display. And so there are, this is a plastic version of the pin holder that's got a circle in the middle so that you can put your flowers in here and still put the candle in the middle. So that's slightly more expensive. So you definitely want that back. So you don't want to let people be putting that on the compost heap. Sorry, just searching through all my props here. There is also being created a whole lot of other sundries, if you like. These are compostable. This is known as an ocean pouch, and they are newly available on the market. Now, I've only got this as a demo. I haven't used it yet, mainly because I don't need to. I've actually designed my work in other ways. But I have heard that these are going to be quite popular. They are compostable, so they can be put on the compost heap. It's a material inside, I don't know if Jill knows more about it, that's compostable, and you soak it in water and it puffs up, and then you can stick stems in it.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, Claire. I have seen them, and I do, and it is an interesting thing. I do always encourage, and I'm glad to see when companies are trying to be more sustainable. I think it's great to encourage that people are having conversations, and it's really interesting. This is one of the things we get asked time and time and again. Is it okay then for me to use the sustainable version of floral foam? And I always ask, which is the sustainable version of floral foam? And for those of you who don't do flowers, very often the floral foam is that green stuff that people put things into that does come in its standard form, which is what Claire's talking about, like designing out, which is the best approach. It's really very positive. They also have different versions that are supposed to have reduced the carbon footprint of them, and to be working towards them being more compostable, but they are not in any way at the moment compostable. And although it's more plant-based, for me, I come back to, just like Claire, do we need it? Just like with any of our sustainability questions we might be asking for ourselves or our church, do we actually need it in the first place? Rather than go to an alternative that might be better in some ways, most of the products, such as the last one, it was a good one to bring it up with, Claire, are still having to be designed, they're still having to be manufactured, they're still having to be packaged, they're still having to be transported, and they cost, whether you're a florist or a church with, small budgets or relying on donations like we do. The idea that you can actually free yourself from that and move to what could arguably be called more traditional methods. Floral foam only came in about the 60s. So previous generations have been doing amazing church flowers without any foam or alternative foam, through the use of the techniques that Claire has been talking about. And we also tend to mostly use sticks and twigs or jam jars and water. And it has actually brought more flower arrangers. We have two. It's not a vast stampede at the door, but it's two. I don't want to stereotype at all, but they are two younger people who heard about what we're trying to do sustainably, wanted to come along, and were less, in their own words, intimidated. I think we have a really friendly team, but less intimidated because they didn't have to learn these new things of how things sit in this green substance. It was more about, like you might do at home, but on a bigger scale, in water, or using the very evil looking flower frogs with the pins on top that are still in our church cupboards, probably from the 40s or 50s actually, And so I do think, whilst it's challenging, it can be so much more of a positive thing to get communities involved, getting people aware of it. And just two examples, we have our church next to our, sorry, we have a school next to our church. They come in now once every term to help with the flowers. And I don't lecture them, don't worry, about all the sustainability issues, but they're actually already sort of carbon literate in many of the ways they talk about. And they take that message of us using seasonal flowers and what's in the gardens now back home with them. And I've heard it once, it might happen more, who knows, of them questioning, where did you get those from, Mum? And actually starting conversations. So if we can do that on that bigger basis, I promised two examples. The other one I'll just quickly put in is buckets. Which I think we mentioned, but before everyone else came on. So in my church, I do have some flower farmers close by, not very close. I know Clare offers a special bucket for churches who are around her farm. But what we've also done is put a bucket in our church porch, and we invite the gardening club, the allotment association, gardeners in the area, if they're trimming, if they've got extra blooms, to pop them in the bucket before 9:30 on a Friday, so we know what we've got, and we use those. And that's our starting point. Our budget benefits, but also there's a real joy of people seeing their own flowers in church, and it might change what your expectations are of having lots of lilies or having big triangular, sort of very bright all the time. But actually, that's not a bad thing, and connects us to the seasons more and what is around us as well. So I'm glad you brought that up, Claire, because that's one of the key things that we're often emailed. Is it okay for me to use this? And there was a furore, not sure if anyone saw it, before the General Synod motion about people banning things, about banning foreign flowers. I think one of the titles of a piece was, and that's not what the motion was about. It was much more about encouraging ways that churches can work with their environment more, cut their costs sometimes, but particularly work with nature. And so for me, not substituting one single-use plastic for another type of single-use material is the best way to go. And Claire, you've shown so many examples of how that's possible.
And there's one more I wanted to show, and that does take us to the all year round thing, because actually I find that dried flowers are both a fantastic way of having flowers in the winter, but are also
I love the Blue Peter style. Here's one I prepared earlier.
A really good mechanic. So this is Limonian, the status, and you can put things through it. But obviously this was last summer, so it's still got colour in it, and we have a lot of dried flowers, and people are you know, like the dried flowers a lot more, and that gives a lot of colour in the winter. But I actually have got a bucket of flowers to show you. I don't want to go over the time, so I want to give time for questions. Here's one I prepared earlier. But I just wanted to show you, because actually, for me, the most important thing in any arrangement when I'm doing funeral flowers or wedding flowers is not actually the wonderful flowers. The poppies were rather gorgeous this morning. I hadn't been in the polytunnel yesterday, so there were quite a few of them open. But actually, the bit I want to show you is round this side. And this is where I think that locally grown flowers are, and actually mostly flowers grown in gardens are the best, because these are the foliages that are the backdrop for any flower display. And they are going to change through the seasons. And so even if you buy a bunch of flowers from the supermarket every week, if you have locally grown foliages from gardens and churchyards and flower farmers, they'll change. So this week I'm using raspberry greens, and I'm using hawthorn, which has been fantastic this year. And I've got rosemary. I use rosemary in all my um, farewell flowers. And I've got spirea, and all of those can create amazing backdrops, and also keep the cost down, and change through the seasons. So actually, when people come to my flower farm for church flowers workshops, the vast majority of the time we spend looking around the field and working out what they can grow themselves. And so often I hear, oh, I've got that. I've never thought of using that. And that is what's really going to help to move church flowers forward, if we don't just think about buying the flowers in, whether it's from abroad or from me. It's actually using what we already have in our wonderful UK gardens, and all the nature that we've got around us, and showing that off in our church flowers. So I hope I've shown you some of the bits and pieces. I just got two more gadgets that I hadn't shown you.
And I will jump in as well, Claire, just to say we've had some questions, and this is actually one that we got on the Lent groups predominantly, about vessels to use for a pedestal arrangement.
Yeah.
And we've also got a question about drying your flowers for winter as well.
Yeah.
If I can jump in on the pedestal just for a second, just because we got that so much, many of our sort of responses and discussions were around trying to think of the pedestal in a different way, and using alternative things. It doesn't have to be the same vessel. It could be a number of different arrangements together. It can be on different sizes, different heights as well. But for vessels, if you do want to still go for the central arrangement, that still is possible, isn't it, Claire, with different types of. And it gives me the chance to plug the video. I put the link in there, but we made, it took a long time, but it was 7 minutes of video that the Sustainable Church Flowers teams made back in February, which was played at Synod and really led into the debate. And there is an example of one that's just in a bucket that you can pick up and put on the compost heap afterwards. So it's a good starting point for talking to and giving a resource for people thinking about that pedestal. But Claire, your thoughts too.
Well, this is just this is twill, by the way, everybody. There's various other things on the market, but I use this one because it's lots of different colours. And it's really good for holding things together. So instead of using any wire, again, that wouldn't be reusable, or it just composts down, and we use this as a mechanic all the time. And going back to what you were saying, when and I were at the Petals with Purpose event in October, I did a large urn, and one of the things that me as a lady of a certain age is I can't carry big things. I have got some fiberglass urns, which are great for, for doing a big display like that, but I can't carry them when they're full of water. And anybody who thinks a florist's life is glamorous, it's just actually humping around lots of flowers and buckets and things. But what I did was I layered things up. So actually, none of the foliage needed to be huge. It wasn't great big branches that were needed. I made layers of buckets so that each branch in itself only had to be 50 or 60 centimeters, but they were layered up. I'll have to send everybody a photo of that one. But it meant we had a really big display. Really big display from actually not that big of branches. So there is always a way of designing it. And that's what the Sustainable Church Flowers Network is there for. It's to help design. And I know that one of the very first churches that I did a church flowers workshop for, about 4 years ago are now helping teach other people how to do things. So it is definitely working it out for yourself, and you don't always get it right first time, but you know, having a play, enjoying playing with flowers, and then working on which mechanics will work forward for you in the future.
That's really helpful. I think I just want to also invite people to put more questions in the chat, or maybe come on, I'm not sure, but whilst people are thinking about questions, just one thing I wanted to specifically mention, because of the diocese areas we've got on the call today. During the synod debate, no idea if anybody watched it or not, I was there on the floor. It was incredibly interesting to be part of that experience, but also slightly terrifying, if I'm honest as well, but fascinating. And during the time on the Synod floor when it was being discussed, I'm very aware that there were some people from Guildford Diocese who had concerns about how their flower team would deal with this. We are absolutely trying to reach out to any churches, parishes that are struggling with it, who don't think that it is for them, or that they're not sure what to do. And getting in touch with the church, Sustainable Church Flowers, is a way to get that support. It is being we're trying to make it as easy as possible, because I don't think I mentioned what the principles are, but you can guess, I'm sure, that the Synod motion put forward that all Church of England churches will consider using seasonal, locally grown flowers where possible, will work towards the eradication of single-use plastics. And I think there was another point about the 5 marks of mission, which I'm not going to guess at, but it was about putting into practice in all aspects of our worship, including flowers, those marks of mission. And for me, it was really encouraging. The debate had its ups and downs. It was a real roller coaster when people asked for it to be stopped. And then we had to pause while people debated if we should carry on. Great drama. But actually, people then came and spoke about how they had changed their minds, how they had seen this in the agenda and thought that doesn't really matter. Why should we bother? And actually then had seen that this is a social justice issue. This is about how we treat the world in which we live and we worship. And actually, flowers represents not just the workers, but the nature that's gone into that, and how much we respect that in as part of our worship as well. So it was really very moving to see that debate played out on the Synod floor, and of course to get the positive result of the motion being passed as well.
And I find when I'm talking to groups, I do a lot of talking to WI groups, and as well as church flowers, to gardening groups, and actually people don't know the background behind flowers. They don't know where they come from. They all think they come from Holland. And as we saw by that map that Jill showed, that they come into Holland from all around the world. And so the vast majority of people aren't aware of that. And one of the reasons for that is that flowers aren't labelled as to their country of origin. Everything else in our supermarkets has to be labelled, but flowers don't have to be. And so it's not surprising that people who are educated and who actually want to know about that kind of thing don't know, because that information isn't available there for everybody. So for me as a flower farmer, I'm really thrilled that this motion went forward, but also not just for me as a flower farmer, but for people to know the background behind how flower farming happens all around the world. That's quite a big thing for me. And if you do want to know how an actual Surrey flower farm works, we do regular transparency tours for you to come and have a look around to see what actually happens on a Surrey flower farm. If you expect no weeds, I'm sorry, you're going to be mistaken. It's always never perfect, but you won't see chemicals, and you will see happy teams. So you are all invited to come along to that.
And I think you have something this Saturday, Claire.
Yeah, this Saturday is Surrey Day. So there will be one of our tours, and I'll make sure that Alison has the details to send out for that.
highly recommend go along to that invitation. I just wanted to thank Gareth for your comment about carbon emissions not currently being in the scope of the net zero carbon and target. It's just been sort of into the energy. I completely agree and hope that it is more specific. I also reminded me about Eco Church, the A Rocha schemes that most of you were probably aware of. We have been trying to work with A Rocha and the Eco Scheme. They already have some information on their website, and the survey asks about flowers, but would really like to develop that further with them. We keep hearing and being sent information about churches that have great ratings like silver, Eco Church, displaying that next to, you know, flown in flowers in floral foam, and it's not to be critical about it. It's about having the information that people need to know that actually there's another way you could improve your practice as well. And actually, if you consider doing your flowers like this and changing these habits, then that could be even better. So we hope that that relationship will continue to develop. And our scheme of supporter, advocate, and ambassador, we've developed that in relationship to theirs, and they see this as an additional evidence for people trying to achieve Eco Church as well. So joined up thinking and talking is definitely what we all need.
Jill and Claire, I'm so grateful to you for blowing open this whole very closed off kind of area of church life, and really giving us an insight into why this is part of our mission, and that there's social justice as well as the environmental justice in there. And I can't actually recommend enough getting into a network, just as A Rocha has really helped so many churches on that kind of 360 sustainability by being part of a network and being able to kind of understand things through working with others. I would really support what you're saying about this Sustainable Church Flowers network, about being just, you know, not trying to do this on your own and joining and then being able to just learn slowly with other people and just, you know, to be able to find somewhere where you can get your information. We're very close to time, but there is still time for if anybody would like to make a comment or have a reaction or any other questions that didn't get in the chat so far. Please do just unmute yourself and ask.
I've also just included my email there. I'm very happy for people to contact me directly as well. I am quite local to you all, as is Claire, which is why it is so nice to be invited to this particular network. And when we had Alison with us at the cathedral in October, we had actually more than 100 people come along to talk about sustainable church flowers from the Guildford and surrounding area. And it was great to see how much interest there was, not just from flower teams by any means, but also from sustainability, people with a wider sustainability interest beyond churches as well. And the cathedral were very, very generous and gracious to us too, and enjoyed Claire's displays for days and weeks afterwards too.
I can just see that Lynette and Rosemary have unmuted. So Lynette, I'm going to ask you to go first if you had something to say.
Okay. We stopped using Oasis a couple of years ago in our church, but we had a talk from the guy who runs the flowers at Salisbury Cathedral. So what you need is a large rectangle of chicken wire. You fold the first bit down like an envelope flap, and then you fold it 3 or 4 times again, and you use that as your mechanics. You can then keep that in the container. You need to wash it in between uses, make sure it's clean, maybe use a little bit of disinfectant, but rinse it thoroughly. And you can keep using that, so you don't discard it after each one, you just keep using it. But it makes it quite a solid sort of thing to hold your flower stems. And the other thing is at Easter, I did an arrangement. I don't know if you can see that. and it's just plants.
Mm.
Sorry, I'm going the wrong way. Can you see?
Oh
It's
yeah,
just plants
Yeah.
in a basket. I used the theme, she thought he was the gardener, and I've used baskets and put plants in there, which then I put in my garden after I'd finished. So it didn't cost the church anything. But it's just a couple of tips to pass on.
yeah, fabulous.
And beautiful seasonal flowers there as well. But like you
Yeah.
say, we use the flowers as well as the vessel. Great.
Thank you so much, Lynette. That's amazing. Rosemary, did you have something to say?
Well, just a quick one. We're a reasonable way down the path of sustainable flowers, but what often more garden flowers and maybe more on the wildflower side, they don't last very well. Our flower, is there any advice on your website as to how we can, keep refreshing them? But we have our team works on a fortnightly rota, topping up and checking in the middle week.
So actually, this is something obviously as a flower farmer I've done a lot of work on, and the main issue is that a lot of things don't last 2 weeks. Foliage does, and flowers you need to know what stage to pick them at and how to condition them. And that's what is the problem with a lot of garden flowers. Actually, you pick them too late, and that's why they don't last. So in my book, there is how to condition each thing, because each thing needs different conditioning. And so there are different ways to condition things and different stages at what you need to pick them at.
And can we have your book details? You sent them somewhere else?
We'll put that in the chat.
Put it in the chat.
Okay.
And I would also say, I don't know if people are on Insta, some people are, some people aren't, or Facebook. That's the sort of question that is really well answered through the Sustainable Church socials as well, because it's very much a community. I found out that cow parsley lasts a lot longer if you, I'm not going to be able to remember now, you douse it in hot water, I think, for a certain amount of time once you've picked it, and then it'll last a lot more weeks. So it depends on the flower when it comes to the conditioning. But on our website, we do have information recommending certain shrubs or things you could grow in your churchyard that are in that category that can last long as well.
And so in the book, it shows you the length of time that things are likely to last. But we have been conditioned to think that flowers should last for 2 weeks, because they are usually picked in very, very tight bud, not so they'll last for us, but so that they can be travelled halfway around the world. Yeah. So if you are picking them at a stage where they're going to look lovely rather than be in bud so they can fit in a box, they are not likely to last as long. The other thing to think about is that actually cut flowers are particular varieties that have been bred for that longevity in the vase. Yeah. And so you can grow those cut flower varieties in your garden, but most people choose to actually grow garden varieties in their garden, so they won't by definition last as long. They're not actually designed to be as long lasting as the cut flower varieties. So it's down to variety and down to how you look after the plants in the garden. So for instance, I tend to water my crops the week before we're going to be picking them, to make sure that they're at the strongest. When you pick them, so not in the heat of the day, unsurprisingly, everybody doesn't want to come and join me at 6 a.m. to pick flowers, but actually that's the best time to pick them, and then letting them rest before you actually arrange them. So if you bring them straight in from the garden, then they won't last as long. And so those are all things that need to be taken into account for your church flowers. But actually, it isn't necessarily that garden flowers don't last. It's just maybe that they've been picked in different types of conditions from those that you buy in.
I love the idea of the bucket, though. Definitely we're going to have a bucket. I'm sure we'll get some in there.
Absolutely.
Just remember, well, depending on your church, just remember to put on not in Lent or Advent. We don't do flowers in Lent or Advent in our church. And in Advent we got huge sways. The porch was filled with these beautiful berries. But so anyway, we've learned from that. So, but it's lots of great fun.
Claire and Jill, I'm so grateful to you for all of your lore, your wisdom, and your knowledge. We've had a wonderful time listening to all of this. To all of those who've tuned in, thank you very much for being here today. And could you, when the recording is available on the website, please share this far and wide with those other churches in your deanery or whoever who may have flower teams who might not see this, so that we can really get that message out to lots of people. And thank you very much. So the next session that we've got is going to be on the June the 2nd at 1 o'clock, and it's going to be about offsetting. And this is going to be with climate stewards, Clare Pomeroy. So that's one for your diaries, June the 2nd. But I think we're going to close up now. So thank you again to Claire and Jill.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Lovely to see you.
Take care. Bye.